Tales from the Trenches. Stories forged in the fires of experience. This episode brought to you by Chemours. Together, we can create a better world through the power of our chemistry. Visit chemours.com. All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us on Tales from the Trenches. We're hanging out with Don Gillis. Hello, Don.
Hi, Cliff. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about brazing and ways to protect things around us and some of the experiences that we've had out in the field. There are a lot of things that we can teach on brazing and burning in particular. And like I always mention, I probably should have named this show "Do As I Say, Not As I Did."
Amen.
So let's share some stories from the world of Don Gillis out in the field.
Here we go. I'm going to tell you all the little dirty secrets now, the skeletons. So
that's right.
Talking about brazing, I have a great story for you. So, we all make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes we make, or some of the times the things that we learn, are mistakes we made in the field. Those are probably the things that stick with us the longest. So let me tell you about what I learned about when compressors, rolls in particular, started coming out with copper-clad steel material on the compressors. When you were replacing compressors, and you probably know where I'm headed with this. So the reason they did that is to make it more rigid, if you will, and if it tipped over your truck or got hit, when they were pure copper, they were easier to bend that copper and get egg-shaped and what have you. So they brought the copper-clad steel in. So when I learned how to braze, it was always, and maybe I was wrong, taught wrong, is to heat that up on the female side and draw that braze in, around it and warm it up first. Well, when I started seeing this copper-clad steel, first of all, I didn't know what they were because it didn't really jump out at me. It wasn't that big of a difference in color. So I'm brazing this compressor in one day. By the way, this happened to me twice. I fell victim to it twice. So I'm brazing on the female side and I got my rag there protecting up against the compressor, and I'm brazing on the female side, and I'm brazing, my brazing rod isn't taking, and next thing I know, the film on the female fitting started to kind of bubble up. It ate it away.
Flaking, right.
Okay, so you know where I'm headed with this. So it's kind of like water in the pipes when you're plumbing, if you've ever done plumbing before. It's not a good day. So it burnt just enough that coating off, and once you get down to that actual steel like that, it's then a real bear to try to braze. It took me a long time
the flux rod out, probably.
Exactly. Get the flux rod out and then it started to happen to me on a second time. So here's what I learned along the way. Fast forward is, in actuality, there's actually an A bulletin with Copeland that states this, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but you can, if you just put the search words in right, you'll find it. It'll pop right up. But we have three different types of heat. We have convection, we have radiant, and we have conductive, right? So they want you to use a 1, 2, 3 method, and the method is this: you're at the female side of the compressor, that female fitting, on the
stub
compressor
coming off the compressor.
Yeah, that's number 3. Number 2 is just entering that female fitting, the pipe itself, and 1's the back a little further. So you start heating the pipe up with 1 about 2 inches out. That pipe is then conductive, right? Starts to heat up in the female fitting. You step 1 step closer, that's 2. You're still not on that compressor fitting to get a little bit warmer. And the idea of it is, when you get on top of that, the actual stub on the compressor, that'll suck in real well. And I have found that to be a blessing. So if you're ever in that situation, but I want to share that with him because I've told people that story before, and it's going back to, it's funny how we're all human and we all make the same mistakes, and before smartphones, we made a lot more mistakes. And, but you get those smiles in the classroom, like, had anybody felt victim to that? And the honest ones will raise their hand and start smiling, nodding their head, because they have, there's no instructional thing on that, or there never was when it first came out or whatever. So that's one thing I wanted to share of disasters in my career that I have found along the way, a learning experience. It's a learning curve. But the other thing is protecting TXVs.
Oh
You
man.
know, there so many TXVs were damaged early in my career, not just by me or not by me, but as a service manager, I saw a lot of TXVs coming back for a lot of reasons. You know, not
Right.
using nitrogen. You know, when you're brazing, that's a big one. I know we hear that all the time, but it's
Huge.
huge, huge, huge. And with POE oil, it became even more impactful. But protecting those TXVs and you know, even liquid line filter dryers and those kind of things, wrapping that stuff, cooling it. They've got a lot of good products out there, gel and what have you. Back in the olden days, because now that's where I'm at in life,
That's right. That's where
it
we
was
learn.
very common when you opened up the back of the door of a van. You may or may not remember this, Cliff. You probably do, but everyone I knew, anyways, had a little steel back when they made steel cans, like a Folger can, a Folgers coffee can with a red rag in it,
Little red
and
rag
that was
bucket.
you. You put your little water in there and you took that rag and that was your
That was
protection.
it.
That's what you did. Yeah. Yeah. But protecting everything like that is, and especially if you use, I know Turbo Torches is a name brand, but
Right.
the acetylene torches by themselves, they're great to carry up 40-foot ladders. I love mine. I always did. But I tell you, when you use acetylene oxygen, it is so much better, in my opinion. When acetylene came out, no knock on it for those that use just acetylene. Please no hate mail. But what I noticed when we went into the era of just the acetylene, those became more popular, is you saw a lot more damaged
Oh
TXVs.
man,
You
a lot of
saw
extra heat there.
service ports. The nuts were actually swelling inside there, and you know the next thing out of someone's mouth is, "Oh, they're junk. They're junk. They're junk." But they didn't realize the longer they were staying on that, they were damaging things. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I could always tell in the grocery market installations who was using straight acetylene and who was using oxygen acetylene. Because all you'd have to do is open up the pans for the evaporators, and wherever the TXV was, if everything around it was scorched, you knew what they were using because of
Yeah,
the amount of heat that is radiated off from is pretty intense.
yeah. So and I have both, and I've used both, but I really like myself. I don't know if I've even ever shared this with you, but I reinvented myself at almost age 30. I've been doing this just at 31 years now, but
Hmm.
I uh, I was a laid off union welder, and you know I worked in a factory and you know making farm equipment, and we laid some pretty good sized beads down. So I already had a good grasp of how to braze and how to weld and those kind of things when I
Right.
got in the field. In fact, that was one of the things that that the owners took notice to me right away, that I could braze pretty well, you know. But you know, so anyways, but yeah, that's a big one there. The compressor's a big one there on the heat also, and then just you know getting that pipe warm enough to put that braze down, and just anything like that. Always remember to you know, one of the things I like to share in the classroom is this: is you know, we've all done it. We've all been bent over a you know condenser of some sort, hanging on and trying to braze in a compressor. Don't unbraze them out of the condenser though.
Right. Cut out.
Please cut them out. Don't braze them out. You need to have a little stub on there anyways if you're going to send it back to crimp. So don't do that. It's not worth it. I've not been around anyone that's got seriously injured, but I've seen and heard a lot of horror stories. In fact, it's became so common on one compressor that I know of that different manufacturers actually moved where their suction line was on the compressor simply for that reason, because the thought was if they lowered that suction coming in, that it would be lower and cool the motor down better the
Sure.
lower it was it would get.
Right.
But actually it did not change anything, and people were getting hurt because they were closer to that oil in the bottom of the compressor, trying to unbraze it out. So be very, very careful with that.
I remember early on in my career, I was a very young guy in the field, and we were changing a compressor on a residential AC, And it used to be a common practice to braze out the compressor. That has since changed because we have changed the way that we design the fittings, and we do a lot more copper-clad fittings now versus solid copper that are attached to the compressor. And I remember it was a scroll compressor. This was early on. This was early 2000s. And I was watching my mentor braze out this compressor, and there was obviously still some refrigerant in the oil, and he had to get it so hot, and I imagine it was because of a copper-clad fitting. He had to get it so hot that by the time it actually came off, there was phosgene gas in the compressor. And when it came out of the compressor, it's just enough vapor for him. He was already bent over, so he was already leaning down, so his lungs were already compressed. And when that phosgene gas hit and he tried to back away from the compressor, when he inhaled, of course, with your lungs compressed, you stand up, your lungs are going to fill, and all he was feeling was phosgene gas, and went straight up and went straight back and flat on his back on the ground and was passed out for about 3 minutes.
It's so funny you brought that up. I occasionally, when I can remember to, if we get on that topic in the classroom, I often ask if anybody, has ever smelled that, and you get people chuckling and laughing, and
Mm,
because we've all done it before. And
right.
I jokingly would say, and I really mean this though, when I would smell that sometimes in my younger years and it hit me, it was so bad that I knew I probably just took some amount of my life off time, years
Yeah.
off my life, but I wasn't sure how much. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly.
That's how
An
nasty it
unknown
was. You knew
danger.
that
Yeah.
can't be good. That can't be good for you. So yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about, you struck up about, the brazing thing too. We talked a little bit about the compressors, cutting them out and brazing them out. Another a fun fact, if you will, is the liquid line filter dryers. I think most people know that, but the objective of that, the primary reason is to remove moisture, right? So
Right.
don't unbraze those, cut them out. When you
Exactly.
unbraze them, you're chasing that moisture back into the system only to be caught again by the new liquid line filter dryer. And as common as you and I know that to be, you'd be surprised how many people do not know that. You know what I mean? Because it's
No,
easier to sweat them out, and that's the way we were kind of
absolutely.
taught. You know what I mean? I mean that's the way it is. So
No, all good stuff. So, a lot of good lessons to learn about brazing and understanding the metals that you are working with. Another one, especially in the commercial refrigeration, is when we start talking about dissimilar metals and knowing how much heat to use. We're bringing a copper line onto a steel fitting. And, it can be done, but it very much is a matter of controlling the heat and using the proper brazing rods. So, whole nother conversation about brazing with dissimilar metals, but being aware of our scenarios, making sure that if we're working with products that have any potential of having refrigerant or moisture in them, like a compressor or a filter dryer, cut them out. Do not try to unbraze those things. We're just asking for trouble. We're asking for issues. All good stuff, Don. Anything else we want to talk while we're here today? Oh, another short topic to discuss when we're on the brazing issue. It amazes me how many times out in the field I have found Schrader cores leaking because they weren't removed during installation and brazing.
oh, yes.
I
I
actually,
love the way your mind's thinking right now.
oh
How did we
man,
miss that one?
how do we miss
Yes.
that one? I used to work with a
Yeah.
guy. I couldn't get it
Oh,
past him. In his
oh my
brain, as
Lord.
long as he wrapped the wet rag around his service valves, the
Yes.
Schraders should be fine. And
Uh,
I couldn't tell you how many jobs I had to go back on his installations and just replace Schrader cores that were leaking. So, we need to
oh my
pay
Lord.
I'm going to pay attention to our installations. Be careful with our heat. Remove Schrader cores anytime possible. And if we're working on an expansion valve and it has a mechanical fitting, if it's a flare or compression style fitting, remove it while we're doing our brazing and try to keep the heat away from those valuable moving mechanical components.
Yeah. One last thing I wanted to share too is you kind of generated a thought in my head when we talk about, you see a lot of these TXVs or EEVs that are going all stainless steel in the
Oh, yeah.
refrigeration side of things. You're more than likely, you may have to use some flux, actual flux, not just in the rods. And you have to be very careful with that. Not really so much with brazing, but the using of flux. Use it sparingly on the male fitting. Don't glob it up in the female fitting, because like moisture, flux is acidic, and it will. And you know, a lot of these things we do on the initial startup, you know this, and I know this, and most people know this, but the longevity of that system actually really depends on how it was installed. You know, compressors
Absolutely.
don't fail a day or two or a year
No.
later because I didn't install it right. They're 5 years down the road, and then and the homeowner just says, oh, they don't make them like they used to, when in fact, because of my not pulling down to 500 microns, not brazing properly, you know what I mean, those kind of things.
Absolutely.
You get it, and most instructors obviously know this, but you need to share those stories with the class and different listeners and stuff like that, because they don't, you assume everyone knows, but they don't, and I'm always learning every day, like you. So anyways, just food for thought.
No, all good practices. Jason Objute has this saying all the time: all condensers are made equally, and then they're installed. And so,
Yeah, that's a good one.
because
Yeah.
so much of our equipment is manufactured to very high specifications, very exact tolerances. So why does one particular brand get a bad rep over another one? Typically, it's in the quality of the installations.
You are so right. And it's amazing when you first start out, you don't realize that, because when you're an installer, I mean, just a little off topic here, but you're always dreaming about the service guy, being the
Right.
service guy.
I want
Man,
to
you're
make that
tickled to
money.
death when you get up to move to preventive maintenance, like, wow,
Right.
I'm getting close to service, and now I'm going to be on call. And boy, I like those guys. They don't have to, beat 10 knockers anymore and all this other stuff. But in actuality, I always tell installers, take pride in what you do, because
It
everything
all
you
starts
do
with the
is going to
installer.
determine exactly. And how many times have something failed in your career? I know mine, it's been a lot. It all falls back on poor airflow. I mean, a
Absolutely.
lot of things that we get calls on, you may have corrected something else, a thermistor, out of caliber or something like that. But if you fix that, the problem resurfaces. A lot of time it's airflow. It's things like airflow. It's just it amazes me how important that is, and how many people get that wrong when they first install something.
Oh, yeah, so true. All right. Well, Don Gillis, thank you once again for hanging out with us, and we appreciate your time today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Cliff. Always a pleasure.